Marti Sanchez is a visionary strategist transforming the B2B landscape. Marti helps companies escape competition and win on brand by creating and owning new categories. His clients see remarkable results, generating inbound opportunities, shortening sales cycles, increasing win rates, lowering customer acquisition costs, and building targeted audiences. Being a ghostwriter seems like similar to being an actor, where you're kind of taking on a character. How many different characters have you taken on? And does it hurt or help the more characters that you take on?
Yeah, I think every client is a character by himself. And the most important skill that I learned as a ghostwriter was to put your ego aside. Because as as a young man, I thought that I was right all the time and that my way of saying things was correct. So learning that it was not my place to say it the way I wanted it, but to remove my ego and fully become the client was one of the most challenging and interesting skills that a ghostwriter needs. I think that's later helped with managing employees, managing larger clients. But I think it's a great analogy of being an actor where you fully immerse yourself in them. You think about the smallest little details of how they say certain words, what are the expressions they use. Things like would they use M dashes or not? Are more of a period guys, more of a comma. Every little detail matters, and just having a lot of empathy for how they express themselves, what they care about. It's a big responsibility. It takes years to build a reputation. It takes one bad post to run it. So you are managing big profiles, and every mistake matters.
It seems like such a virtuous cycle. You need a paycheck, and so you're getting money, but you're also learning along the way, and furthermore, developing relationships that help you learn in the future and maybe lead to potential leads with clients and business opportunities, etc. So that's great.
Yeah, I was living the life. It's a great starter business. I always recommend that if you're starting your first company, do something service based versus don't start a tech company, don't start a SaaS. Start something that you can monetize quickly, that gives you cash flow, that doesn't require money up front, and the leverage is one of the skills that you already should have, and get paid to get better at it. So that's where I friends, peers that want to move into entrepreneurship. That is a great step one. Use that and then turn that cash flow, which is something that we're working on now, into things that are more scalable, things that you can sell, but with the confidence and the trust that you have a service-based business that supports you and supports your cash flow and supports your family, and allows you to take risks later on.
That makes sense. And competition isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like you said, there's a trade-off there. And then you transition into podcasting. Could you talk about what led to that?
Yeah, podcasting really came down to the same problem that I had, which is not having a good network, right? When I decided to do this and I was very serious about it, I realized that it was going to be really hard for me to build that trust with clients if they didn't come from referrals or they didn't see my content, which later on would kind of drive that influence Podium, which is the company that we do now. So podcasting was an excuse for me to get my foot on the door. When I was 19 years old, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. So I put on a suit, printed a resume that had nothing on it, and just knocked on as many law firms as I could to get an internship. And I would just lie my way through the secretaries to get in. Podcasting wasn't a lying my way in, but it was a way to give out value to someone in order to build that connection, meet them, and build a relationship that I didn't need to monetize. I just wanted to get to know as many people as I could, build a network of people that trusted me, and I knew good things would come from it. So podcasting was hey, let me help you, give you some exposure. Let me help you create content for you, and let's connect. Eventually, that became one of the services that we offered because it worked so well for us, where at one point, I think 20% of our clients, 20% of our interviews on the podcast will either become clients or be a referral to somebody else. So it was something that we've kept doing since then. And I just really enjoy it. It's a great way to connect, learn stories, and honestly make friends as well.
Did you take any courses or have any mentors? How did you become a better podcast host? Because for me, when I started, I was a bit overwhelmed at how it seems very simple, but there's a lot of little details.
Yeah, I think I became better over time. My girlfriend and I were just watching one of the first interviews that I did, and like I was wearing a backwards baseball hat, and I was, all over the place with my questions. I didn't really guide any structure. On the bright side, some of the earlier guests were a few friends of mine, or so they trusted me, and it was fine. But like, what structure should a podcast have? How to make a guest feel comfortable and warm them in? What type of questions should you ask? How do you follow up? When do you interrupt and change the topic? When do you not? These are all things that I learned with time. I think we've done probably. I think you might have done more. I think this is 90 something for you, right? If
You're
I'm not
actually
mistaken.
100.
100. Oh, I'm honored. Amazing. Yeah. That feels meaningful. So I think we were in the 90s when we did the last one. So it takes a lot of practice. I think you know that probably better than anybody at this point.
Yeah, but if you enjoy it, it's easy practice.
It's fun. Yeah.
So you still do podcasting. Have you tapered off a little bit now that you're running your full-time agency?
Yeah, we have. We need to bring it back. This is something that some might to do. It's hard. We do this as a service for our clients, and we know how hard it is for it to do ourselves. Our agency has grown. As a founder, sometimes you have to prioritize, but this is one of probably my biggest mistake over the last year is kind of like falling back on not doing it. It's a matter of habit, right? I think it's a matter of like structuring it, delegating, and being very clear on how to do it, when to do it. So that is one of the initiatives that we're bringing back in these days for the agency, because it's just so meaningful, and it makes an impact in our top line revenue. Like, it's not just that it's meaningful and you have these great stories, but it actually drives business. And this is something that we have to do more of if we want to continue to stay relevant.
And what led to you deciding to do more than the podcast and doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, so when I started, we first started with ghostwriting, and the client that we had as his ghostwriters, then he was doing a podcast. So he was working with a podcast agency. He wanted to write an article, so he was going to talk to a long form writer. He wanted to do LinkedIn and Twitter, so he was going to talk to a social media team, and he was just stressed out about, hey, I'm having to talk to 8 people to really build a brand here. And I remember telling him, hey, if I can like center this and headquarters in one thing, one service where you spoke to one person and that message is transcribed and transferred across the whole organization, would that be interesting to you? And he was like, absolutely. And I was like, well, give me 2 months and I'll set it up for you. So we realized that for companies and people, entrepreneurs that want to build a content engine and really build a brand, they need to attack the audience where they are, and that's going to be in many different places. And with how hard it is to get attention from people, you really want to be in as many relevant places to your audience as possible. So podcasting is a way, LinkedIn is a way, Twitter is a way, and we just wanted to make sure that we were creating a comprehensive content execution and content strategy for our clients, where the message was cohesive, the work was efficient, and we could deploy that in as many places as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask you about the different platforms and maybe the clips that you're sharing on different platforms. Is there a strategy, like a platform-specific strategy, for example, something that goes on TikTok is different than something that goes on Instagram or X or YouTube Shorts, or is it kind of copy and paste?
Okay, the realistic answer is, if you're starting out, it might be copy and paste, and that's fine. Once you have a more time and bandwidth and you have a team around you, there is native content to each platform, and I think it's important. There are differences in how the audience wants to consume content on Twitter versus on YouTube, where you can be more longer form, versus on TikTok, where the shorter form that you are, the better. There are differences in how you write the caption for each post on Twitter versus LinkedIn versus YouTube versus TikTok. On TikTok, you can be more provocative. On Twitter, you can be more witty. On LinkedIn, you might want to be a bit more professional and be more centered. So my recommendation here, if you're doing it yourself, is to consume the platform before you create. Spend hours on TikTok scrolling up. And I know it's going to feel useless and childish, but do it. Do the same on Twitter. Do the same on LinkedIn. Look at what the post with the most engagements, the most comments, the most vibrant content, what does that look like? What type of best practices do they have? On LinkedIn, the first 3 lines are above the fold before this see more comes in. So what type of hooks do they put there? How do they drive comments? Is there a call to action? Do they put the links in the comments versus on the post? Because the algorithm doesn't want you to get off the platform. There are all these small little details that do matter, and they are very platform centric. So you do want to create content holistically in a more native to each platform way. At the end of the day, good content is good content. So these are all satellite things that, while they do matter, the question is the post good or not? And having that good taste for good content is the number one skill in content execution and content strategy. At the tactic level, there's an endless things that we could try about, and by 6 months, they will be totally different. So that's more of look, learn, and adapt as it goes.
Yeah, you have to be in it and digesting it to understand it. Same with writing, right? You have to read. You can't just write in a vacuum. What do you think about these tools like Opus that have a virality score, and they're like AI, where they just look at your clip and supposedly they're choosing the best bits, and that you can put out 10 clips versus someone else who's painstakingly by hand editing 1 clip a day? Do you think that over time, if that 1 clip a day is the right clip, it will outperform the 10 clips that may or may not be viral? I'm just curious what your exposure or thoughts are with the AI entering the space.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think AI can be leveraged in different ways. We use them in some, and I'm happy to like just chat about that. When it comes to like a virality score, I am a bit cynic about it. I don't know how true that is. We've tested. I trust more my taste and my team's taste than AI right now. Now, if that changes, I am the first one to switch. Like I am very flexible in my AI judgment. As of right now, I think good taste is still a very personal thing that can help, create the specific clips that you need in the editing way that it requires for them to get as much reach as they can. That said, I do think there's good use cases of AI. I think there's very interesting copywriting and ghostwriting uses of AI that we've tested, and some of them we have deployed. And I think that in the next few years, this will be a totally disrupted space. I don't think that content creation without AI is feasible in 3 to 5 years at all. At least if you don't use it in some shape or form.
Right. Yeah, we're also adapting. The organic humans are adapting to detect AI-generated content fairly quickly as well. So that can have diminishing returns.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can say it. And it's bad taste. Maybe one day we'll change, but right now I feel like it's bad taste.
It seems like, I don't know if it was serendipity or just scrappiness or like that entrepreneurship in the blood, like I mentioned, but it seems like you took a very fast route and a very organic route to leveling up your entrepreneurship career, starting with ghostwriting, getting into podcasting, and now running Influence Podium, helping other companies with their media content. But everyone wants to know, now that you're here, is there anything you would have done different? Are there any other hacks? Could you have gotten here quicker?
I think there is something to be said about being more focused early on. When I started, there's a bit of a shiny object syndrome, right? Like I started with drop shipping soccer jerseys onto eBay, right? I started with selling bracelets on Shopify. So there was a lot of different business models that I kind of tested on early on before, fully deciding and committing. Writing is the one thing I do know how to do. Let me do that at 100%. I think I lost a couple of years on that. I don't regret it, because that did show me different industries. It did show me things that I did not want to do. So testing different business models at the beginning is both a pro and a con. I think I wasted a bit of time there. And then I think the one skill that I didn't have early on that I wish I would have invested more into learning through courses, through mentorships, was sales. Sales is probably the one differentiator as a founder. And it's not something that came naturally to me. And I wish that I would have invested early on into just upgrading and up-leveling my sales skills. I kind of fell back into, if I just put out great content, people will trust me so much that I don't have to be a great salesman. And that was true. But if I could have just been, 50% better salesman 3 years earlier, we'd probably be 2 times bigger right now. So that is the one skill that I wish I would have done better.
I second that. Yeah, it's interesting. Sales had kind of like I guess, a bad name or something, because it seems it's like pushing things onto people that maybe don't need them, but that might be a small sliver that you're exposed to when really sales is everywhere, and not just everywhere, but essential. So me too. I'm trying to improve there.
That was my unlock when I realized that I don't have to be Grant Cardone as a salesman, right? Like I don't have to be the fast, quick, witty, pushy salesman that I think of when I think of a salesman, right? That I can learn who I am in my own salesmanship and just double down on my personal skills, right? Like if my salesman skills are as a consulting, right? Like I come here, I tell you what I would do if I was in your shoes. I make you feel comfortable, try to push you. Like it, great, let's work together. Don't like it, that's totally fine. So when I figured that out, that's when I got better. But it did take me probably 5 to 6 years until I felt somewhat comfortable to be on a sales call without having a panic attack.
Yeah, you touched on something wise there, which is basically be yourself. And I've worked with a sales coach who's brilliant, and she says you're not selling anything, you're just solving problems. So be yourself, solve a problem. If maybe that's not the person and the problem for you today, like go to the next person, or ask them if they know someone who might have that problem, etc. But it takes a little bit of the pressure off, because I found in my case anyway, I was trying to be someone I wasn't. I had this image of what a salesman was, like you said, like this kind of fast talking chameleon. And it was uncomfortable for me. And maybe on like a primal level, people are picking up on that discomfort in you and they don't want to buy. And they're like, oh, I hate sales. And it's just like this vicious cycle in that case. Whereas if you just step up, it's like, okay, this is what I do. I love it. I can help you in this way. I've done it for these people. Would you like to just like sample it? No, we could talk later. Or if you know someone else, please let me know. Have a great day. Happy to talk anyway. Something like that. Like just really low pressure.
Honest.
Yeah, honest, right.
That client that I was mentioning, my first client as a ghostwriter that then became my mentor, he put it in a great way that I like to think of it myself, which is if you see that they have a problem, you're doing them a disservice by not offering and selling them your services, right? Like you are hurting them by not showing them how you could help them, and you don't want to hurt people, right? So that was a great way for me to put it. There were other issues I think around salesmen, like my relationship with money. I think is an important one, where my mother used to make $1,900 a month, and it was a single mom, and to me $2,000 a month felt like a lot of money. So I would never sell anything over $2,000 a month. It took me 4 years to sell a service over that when it was worth much more. So like being self-aware, understanding where your limitations and where your mental roadblocks are happening, I think is a great way to discover what's blocking you in life is blocking you as an entrepreneur. And I think that's one of the lessons I've learned over the years.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I relate to that as well. I forgot to charge for my time. Like I was just spending my time as if it's this magic thing that falls out of the air. And then I somewhat recently, don't tell anyone, just realized that, oh, I should probably be charging for this. So yeah, there's loads of lessons you're going to be learning. But you just got to dive in.
It's a great mirror. It's a great mirror to your face.
Right.
That's one of the main benefits of entrepreneurship. It shows you who you are and and the things you have to work on.
Totally. So about media, it's everywhere now. And a lot of companies are, as you probably see, trying to add on a media entity because they've kind of focused on what they do and left out the media side. Why is it that media seems to be more important now than it was previously?
Well, I think there's a variety of reasons, right? There's paid media, for example, is more expensive than ever. When the cost of acquisition on paid rises, given it because of iOS 12, 13, 14, where we have and privacy regulations, where now paid ads aren't working as good as they used to, given because there's more competition and there's limited ad inventory. When you're seeing your cost per mile rise, when you're seeing your cost per acquisition rise, you look at other ways. You look at ways that are cheaper and can lower your CACs, right? So I think that's a main reason of why companies, especially in B2B, are looking at other places to drive pipeline. And then there's a rising awareness that we have to meet customers where they are, and that we have to create an empathetic selling experience on how they want to buy. So especially in B2B, and this is a bit different in consumer products, but in B2B, there's a larger retainers, there's a larger order values where you need trust before you buy. And media content is a great way to drive that trust so that you can leverage that relationship. So when they're ready to buy, you're the one that's top of mind. So how do you win the war of attention is why media companies or B2B brands with a media company adjacent to them, I think, are rising. And I think it's reshaking how marketers think about building brand equity, and actually driving inbound revenue and inbound pipeline.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you see things changing? You mentioned AI generated content or having to become more comfortable with AI in the next few years. Do you see anything else that might be changing?
Yeah, I think the way we think about podcasting, for example, would change. I think current podcasting like this, like the one I'm doing, is very interview based. I see B2B brands especially taking a lesson from consumer brands, which I think is kind of like the normal trajectory where B2B takes from consumer. When instead of it calling a podcast, it's a show, and that show is made by seasons instead of like an endless number of episodes. That season has a trajectory, has a common concept for it, and has something more than the guest to bring value to the audience. Maybe it's an interview in a different setting. Maybe it's doing something else while they're interviewing themselves. Something more engaging. Maybe it has animations. So the production value of shows in B2B will increase. I have no doubts about that. I think we're already seeing it. Some companies that do it very well are Wistia, Profitwell. Those are great examples of companies doing stuff like that. I think that's going to be more common for marketers that are forward thinking.
That's great. That's kind of the direction I want to head, is in my travels, rent out studios, meet people where they're at, and then add on to that some of the stuff that you mentioned there.
Yeah, it's going to be very Netflix inspired, right? Like there's going to be it's going to be a season, it's going to be different shows. I don't think it's one show. I think it's different shows with different concepts for each show. I think there's going to be a lot of that. One of my other predictions is that especially in B2B, we are going to see what I call external media companies. So right now there's a lot of like internal media companies where the name of the media company is still attached to the brand of the company. I think in the future we're going to separate them, and the media company will have a different name and will have a different brand, and it will still drive to the main company, but it will drive it more indirectly and more organically. A great company that does that is acquire.com, where they have a separate entity called Bootstrappers. Acquire is actually one of our oldest clients, and they're a fantastic team. And they have a separate entity called bootstrappers.com, where they tell the stories of bootstrap companies. Bootstrap companies are their ICP for acquire.com. So they are able to build that audience more organically and more naturally and easily because it's separated and it doesn't come from Acquire, it comes from Bootstrap. And then they leverage that audience back they funnel it back to the main company. So we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more separate media companies.
Makes sense. And how about you with where you're at now? Are you going to continue building as you have been, or do you have like some different goals in different industries or anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, honestly, I'm really happy about where Influence Podium is right now. Our growth has stabilized at something that feels comfortable. Again, as an entrepreneur, I think self-awareness, right? Like I don't want to build a huge company or a huge agency. I want to build something that is solid. We have the core team of people that I really trust. So we're going to keep growing, but we're going to grow steadily. And I am open to exploring other alternatives. I had a lot of fun building a private community. And I think this is a fantastic way of separating and diversifying, my projects. So something like that feels really interesting. And I think every entrepreneur has tons of ideas, right? Like I want to sell jamon, Spanish jamon, which is the type of food, to the United States. I think we all have SaaS ideas that could help us and we could externalize. So I'm keeping my options open, and I am looking for something else to add. But I do believe that media and content are only increasing. The trend for it and the need for it will only go up over the next few years. I think AI is going to present some challenges, but also some opportunities to be more efficient. And I think it can increase our profit margins while delivering a better experience. So it feels like an exciting field to be in right now. And it's not something that I want to separate myself from.
That's great. Did you ever think of opening a restaurant someday?
Restaurants have bad margins.
Yeah.
So unless it's like a very elite luxury restaurant, it feels like a complication. I have a good friend who just opened a restaurant, and my role is to go support him, but I see him very stressed out, so probably not.
Okay.
But the
Maybe he doesn't have a media company.
He doesn't have a media company, and I've been telling him about it. But the Spanish jamón idea, it's something that I am starting to inch into.
Okay, nice. And how do you keep up to date? Like, how do you keep your mind sharp? Are you podcasting, books, travel? Could you just share?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to touch it from as many industries as possible. I think a good marketer and a good founder steals from very separate industries and brings them back. Music is one of my biggest passions, so I love to follow what musicians are doing from a marketing perspective, from a content perspective. I'm actually just a few weeks away from dropping my first punk rock album, which I'm very excited about.
Wow.
Here's a plug.
Yeah.
So music is a great that I steal from, and then just trying to see what I love from consumer brands, from artists, and bringing it back is one of my ways of staying sharp. I try not to follow too much other marketers in the space and look for innovative ideas somewhere else and bring them back in.
Yeah, that's smart. And choose your own adventure, kind of. So when does this album drop? Is the date set?
We are mixing the last song. It's an 8-song album, so we're just mixing the last song, which it's exciting. It's been a passion project for the last couple of years, and just trying to do something different. And right, I think as a founder, it can be very easy to drown yourself in the obsession of your company, and I'm more guilty than that as everybody else. So having something to just put my mind at ease and think about something else has been nice. So I recommend it.
Definitely. So influencepodium.com is your company. Is there anywhere else that people can follow you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place. LinkedIn.com/it's Marti Sanchez is the URL. I think that's probably the easiest way to stay updated. That's where we post content, posting what we're seeing in the industry, best practices and trends. So that's probably the best place as well.
Great. Well, thanks, Marty. It was a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you, David. Likewise. Thanks for having me.